people say there's no good men anywhere. There's a lot of great men. You just need to want to see them, because there's a lot of them around. And I think a lot of us get ignored because it's easier to see the bad in the world.
Yeah, social media in many ways doesn't help that. It's very easy and more clickable to share negativity than it is to share positivity.
I can understand that even from my childhood, I looked around and was like, is there any good men around? But I think a big switch for me in that came when I started to pay attention inwards as well. Where am I embodying these traits that are not great?
As a baseline, all human beings are flawed. And as soon as we start pretending that we're not, that we're on a road to somewhere really not useful for anybody. Very often when we speak to men, we ask them to communicate their emotions to us. But if I said to you, speak Spanish to me now, and you might say, I can't. And it doesn't matter how much I ask, you can't do it. Quite often, that is the case with some men. They don't have the language to communicate how they feel. For a very long time, I allowed my father's version of the way life was to dictate my path forward. And there was something really freeing about. But when we navigate things, we got to understand the difference between our emotions and somebody else's.
So, listeners, back with another wonderful episode, and really looking forward to this one. This is a man who I met at a wonderful banquet, as I've mentioned to a few of you, this banquet for brothers that was on a lovely place called Ansol. And it was just filled with wonderful men, a space where you meet these great men who you would love to talk to, the men that you look up to, men whose stories are incredibly powerful. And today's guest is no different. I've just spent much of my morning binging on his documentary, which is stunningly shot and beautifully put together with a wonderful story. It really resonated with me because it touched me in various childhood memories and so forth as well. So, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But today we have with us Johnny Lawrence. How are you doing, Johnny?
Brother, I'm good, man. I've been really looking forward to this. I didn't get the opportunity to chat to you as much as I'd like to at the Banquet of Brothers. It was a really busy room. It was a little bit out of my comfort zone, which surprised me because that doesn't happen that often. And when we were up in that top room and we were doing all the different exercises, I have to say it's been a very long time in a non-aggressive stance where I've had to look into another man's eyes for that long. And that brought up some unusual feelings within me, but that was the intention of it, which I thought was frankly brilliant. So it was an interesting night, and I learned a lot, and it was nice to see everyone, as you say, great characters in the room.
Yeah, a lot of great men in the room. I know we spoke very, very briefly at one point, and there was so many people in there to kind of get around. And I think it's this, what came to my mind actually midway through my sentence there was, it's so easy in this day and age that, people say there's no good men anywhere, right? And I even had on Instagram a couple of days ago, I commented on one of Paul Bronson's reels featuring the couple from, what's that show? Love is Blind. And I said, one woman said to me in the comments, she was like, name 10 great men. And in 30 seconds, I put 13 in there, right? And I guess what I'm saying here is like, we sat in a room where I think it was like 30, 35 men in that room, right? Great men doing various things across the world of self-development, coaching, mental health, even, tattooing, all sorts of things. I met some incredible characters, food, but all men who are under the guise who men are doing great work in the world and trying to make the world a better place. And I guess what I'm saying, listeners, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, there's no good men anywhere. There's a lot of great men. You just need to want to see them. You need to want to see the great men and switch some of your attention away from the terrible men, the leaders of the world, to seeing the everyday man who's doing wonderful things in his office, in his home, with his children, in his work, who doesn't look like a superhero and maybe isn't the leader of a company, and he may just be a middle manager or like us, a coach, but he's equally doing amazing things and is a great man, because there's a lot of them around. And I think a lot of us get ignored because it's easier to see the bad in the world.
Yeah, and I think social media in many ways doesn't help that, because I think it's very easy and more clickable to share negativity than it is to share positivity. AI, that changes things as well. You can never really fully rely on what you're watching anymore, unfortunately. I worry because I've got literally thousands of hours of me on video, and I'm like, oh man, I'm screwed. When AI starts coming in and making out videos, I'm in trouble, I think. But it's yeah, I resonate with that. I'm surprised that person said that. That's a hell of a thing to say.
Yeah, and I understand a lot of women feel like there's not a single decent man in the world. They don't meet any, and so forth. And I could understand that even from my childhood, I looked around and was like, is there any good men around? But I think a big switch for me in that came when I started to pay attention inwards as well. Like, where am I embodying these traits that are not great? But also started to know what the traits were. I think that's something that's in kind of missing. I think we look at women and we know what the good traits of a good woman are, but we aren't always very clear on what the traits of a good man is and how they'll look and the different ways they'll look, so we can actually spot them when they're in front of us. Because, I think everyone knows wonderful men who are just very understated, maybe quiet, and just go about the business and don't say a word and aren't singing and dancing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And it's interesting that you say that you had to turn it on yourself before you was able to fully understand it and look at yourself. Because one of the plights that I'm always trying to do is I'm trying to show up as the man that I needed when I was a kid. And I know that that's like a quote or whatever, I'm sure. But for me, it's like recognizing that as a baseline, all human beings, forgetting about women and men, all human beings are flawed. We're all flawed. And as soon as we start pretending that we're not, that we're on a road to somewhere really not useful for anybody, because our egos are great. They're great. I spoke to Coop Blackson once on the podcast. I think you've spoken to him too. And he was saying about how our egos are not good or bad, but they are always there trying to justify their own existence. And I thought that's really interesting. That's a really interesting way to look at it, because we're always trying to gravitate towards comfort and away from discomfort, right? And we very often do that through the means of familiarity. But sometimes what's familiar to us isn't good for us. And sometimes some of the situations that we grow up in, some of the traits that are now looked at perhaps as toxic, they were necessary. They certainly was for me when I was a kid. I couldn't have walked around with a vulnerability Care Bear type way when I was a kid, because I'd just got beat up and that's the end of that. So, but it's recognizing that every part of you has a place. Every part of you has a place. And that's the goal, isn't it? Is to look and to ask yourself, which part of me do I need to be now? Which part of me is the most authentic part of me in this situation? Because I met someone the other day and they said that vulnerability is always strength. And I thought, you've never spoken to someone and then they've gone and told everyone what you said, have it? It's never happened to you. Because that's what happens. Vulnerability is strength in the right place. But when you're speaking to somebody, say at work, and you tell them something private about yourself and they can use that information to get the promotion that you should get, that's probably what will happen.
Yeah. It is this thing that, we've come to realize, vulnerability is useful and great. But I think sometimes we have to be honest we have to be selective to some degree, right? And I know when men hear that, often work with clients and like, oh, that means that I should only tell that to like my best friend in the world. And I think it's like seeing there's also these levels of vulnerability as well that are necessary in our lives and our works and so forth. But I also hark back to what you said, like, I've sat in classrooms with young boys and you want to talk to them about vulnerability and they're like, I can't be vulnerable. That girl over there, like if she hears anything about me that she could tell the whole school around to make me get laughed at, even if it's for 5 minutes, like she's doing it, right? Because school is a brutal place for kids. And it's, some of the stories I hear from kind of parents who are a little bit older or have older kids, like, mixed in now with the social media and this kind of ability to constantly bully someone. It's like a really, really brutal place for young kids. So when you're talking to young boys and you're like, you just need to be kind and vulnerable, you have to also, I feel you have to look at the environment they're in and be like, does that environment, is that conducive to vulnerability and openness? Like there may be moments where it is, but it might not be something they can be with all the time because they're in a fierce, somewhat competitive environment often.
Yeah, I mean, I created a model called the M.A.D.E model, and it's M.A.D.E is an acronym for morals, ambitions, drivers, and environments. And it's the last part, the environments. It's recognizing that you might get to know yourself. So you learn your morals, you learn what your belief systems are, you learn what your values are, and you embody them so that you're able to make good decisions when you're navigating life. You look at your ambitions and you decide, what is it I want to achieve in life? And quite often that's masked and mixed up with lots of other people's versions of who they want you to be. Then you have to unpick that and untangle that and work out which is yours and which belongs to other people's. And that's why your values are helpful. Then there's your drivers. It's a bit like the fuel, the petrol you put in your car. And you have to be able to tap into that on the days when it's very difficult, because we're not always going to wake up with a hop, skip and a jump wanting to go and train early in the morning or go for a run or do whatever it is we need to do. Sometimes you're grumpy and your partner's in bed nice and cozy and you're like, oh, it's raining and I got to run and all of that. But it's that last part, the environment. And that's what's important. You've done all of this work on yourself. You've understood yourself. You've understood what you want. You've understood what drives you. And then you have to look honestly. And if I was anything in life, people call me a podcaster, a speaker, a coach, and I'm all of those things. But what I am most at the top of that list is I'm a truth seeker. I'm not interested in being right or wrong or being worshipped or starting a guru, group, cult, whatever. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in finding the truth. And quite often I find that the truth I find is not what I would like it to be, but it's true and you can trust it and it's solid. So it's really important that we look honestly at the people, places and things in our lives. And we ask ourselves, I know I've known this person since I was 2 years old. I know that they're my boy, but do they support the person I want to be right now? That is a savage question to ask yourself. When I gave up alcohol, there was a lot of people that I thought would be there for me, and they wasn't. Interestingly enough, the people that I thought would run didn't. And I was like, that's interesting. That's really interesting, you know? And then there's the places that you go where, let's face it, you know that if you go down there, you're going to speak to that guy and this is going to happen and it's all going to get out of hand and you're going to wish, and you just know it's coming, you know? And then there's the things like these things are helpful, the phones and all of that, but there's been times when they've been a huge distraction and I've lost half an hour of my life on TikTok and I don't know how, you know? So what I'm getting at is that vulnerability is strength, absolutely. But if you use that model to look at yourself that way through the eyes of your morals, ambitions, drivers and environments, and you put it all together, everything matters. Everything. Our surroundings, we can influence the people in our surroundings, which is what we try to do. Yeah, you and I, we try to motivate people, inspire people, help people. But sometimes you can be around people and they're motivating you. They're influencing you. They're bringing out your more negative traits, because remember, we're all flawed, right? And there are people that are perfect. They know exactly what button to push in order to get you to flash or to get you to do whatever it is that they want you to do. And sometimes they don't even know how they're doing it. They're just experts, and it's usually family members. You know, like my sister, she's brilliant. Like she was like, "Oh, you're cool, you're calm, yeah. We'll see about that." So, yeah.
Those family members have been at it for like, you know, the best part, well, our whole lives basically, you know.
Well, they created the triggers, a lot of them.
Oh yeah, they create them so they can use them later on.
That's it. Yeah. The puppet masters.
Oh man. And you touched on a little bit there about your history, and as I said, you know, I listened to your documentary, watched your documentary, and I think it was such an incredible story. And I'm going to put the link in the show notes, people, because I really highly recommend you take 30 minutes of your time to watch this, because you're going to reflect a lot on your own life in that. But kind of coming from that, you know, in the documentary, you talk about kind of grew up in this kind of mix of a life that was filled with kind of fear and struggles at school, education, even, you know, poverty and violence. And there's a really poignant moment of really stepping away from that life. And as we're going to be talking about emotions today, I wonder, as this kind of starting place, like how did those life experiences shape your relationship to emotions and feelings?
I talk a lot about emotional translation. Very often when we speak to men, we ask them to communicate their emotions to us, or we say, how you feeling? What's going on? How are you? All of those things, right? But if I don't know whether you can speak any different languages or anything, I don't know if that's something you can do. But if I said to you, speak Spanish to me now, and you might say, I can't. And I say, well, I need you to. I want you to. But I can't. Yeah, but I really want you to. Come on, let's go. You're like, you don't know how to speak Spanish. And it doesn't matter how much I ask. It doesn't matter how much I want you to. It doesn't matter if I shout loudly or I speak slowly or anything like that. You can't do it. And I think quite often that is the case with some men. They don't have the language to communicate how they feel. And that is frustrating. And that is very often what comes out. So when I was a teenager and late teens, early 20s, I was angry. I was frustrated because I was misunderstood. I'm a kind person. I'm a good person. And I was always trying to do that. But I never had a father figure. All I ever saw was violence. I was let down by school. I was let down by the wider world. And I was let down at home. I didn't realize that at the time. I just thought that's what life was, you know, and I'm walking around with all these really complicated emotions, these events that happen in my life. And I applied these meanings to these events at a very early age in a way in which I was trying to make sense of them so that I felt safe. So I had that psychological safety. And guess what? When I was 8, I didn't do the best job at translating what these emotions meant and these events meant. But yet I didn't know another way. So I carried these things with me. And I think that sometimes in life, in fact, I'd say nobody escapes it. Everybody has events in their life that are so difficult, so painful, so torturous and impossible feeling that they cannot and they do not feel like they can move forward in life. So they make up these little stories in their head, these narratives, these things that they would rather believe that frankly aren't much better, but they're able to work with that. And then they sell that version of that lie, of that story to the world so that they can buy it back. And that's what I was doing. I surrounded myself with certain types of people that were willing to buy my bullshit. And I was happy to buy it back because it's what I wanted to believe instead of what was true. And then I met my wife. Well, I didn't meet my wife. I met a girl and she became my wife. And she was lovely. And she didn't come from that background. And that's when it started for me. That's when I started to see that there was a different life. And all of a sudden it became harder and harder to live the lie. And I started to become aware of when I'm in this situation, I feel really scared. I feel really unsafe. And I can't feel like that because I'm tough, right? So I'm going to get angry and I'm going to do stuff. And then before I know it, my behavior is affecting my life. And I'm like, what's happening? And I'm so confused and I'm so overwhelmed and I'm so scared by my own. Sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. And I felt out of control. I felt like I was going crazy. And then that's when addiction comes in. And I can only speak from myself. You know, I'm not a professional addiction expert. But what I will say is that I have found in most cases that addiction has nothing to do with the thing you're addicted to. You're not chasing alcohol. You're not chasing gambling. You're not chasing sex. You're not chasing shopping or your phone or TikTok or whatever. You're chasing a feeling. Mm-hmm. When I used to drink till 3 o'clock in the morning, I wasn't doing it because I loved wine. I was doing it because I knew that when I stopped, I'd go to sleep. And when I woke up, I would feel the way I always feel. I didn't want to feel like that. So in answer to your question, I think that people don't understand our emotions. We have primary emotions and they are so powerful and so sensitive. They are emotions about events and they're so difficult to have that we have this real easy get out clause. I'm not going to feel vulnerable. I'm not going to feel scared. I'm not going to feel helpless. I'm going to be angry instead because now I feel powerful. Now I feel like I can do stuff. Now I feel like I'm in control. And now I'm doing this anger thing. And then people say, why are you so angry? And that makes you angry. And you lean into the anger. But actually, I found quite a lot of the time a useful question I ask myself is not why do I feel a certain way or why am I doing this? I ask myself what? Because a why is a very introspective, almost finger-pointing, accusational way of asking somebody how they feel, whereas what is more exploratory. Sometimes people don't know why they feel the way they feel. So they get angry and they might say to themselves, because I'm a dick, or because I'm this, or because I'm that, and they start blaming themselves. When actually, if you say what's made you angry? So a good example is, why are you angry? Or calm down, or something really useful like that. You know, so why are you angry? Well, why am I angry? I'm angry because this and that, and because I'm this and that, and it just makes you more and more angry, and it becomes circular, and resentment and blame, and all of these things come out. What's made you angry? Well, I went over there and I was speaking to that person, and they said this. Oh, so you felt rejected, you felt inadequate, and you didn't want to feel inadequate. You didn't want any part of that, so you decided to be angry instead. Right? Mm-hmm. I understand. You know, so. You're like, wow, I only asked a quick question. but the point I'm trying to make is that emotions are complicated. And when you collect a lot of negative emotions, and the main one for me was fear, that is the lens in which you see the world. Everything I looked at, everything I experienced, I saw through the lens of fear, through paranoia, through anger. So yeah, I'll stop there. So I just go on and on and on.
No, it's a beautiful explanation, and it's so true. You know, so many men, we don't have the language of emotion. We don't know how to interpret what we're feeling, and it seems so foreign to a lot of people. And I always say this to people: if I know how to do something really well, and it feels just normal to me because I've been doing it my whole life, if I meet someone who doesn't know how to do that thing, I'm baffled. I'm just like, what do you mean you don't know how to cook food? You don't know how to cook? What do you mean everyone knows how to cook? When actually I've learned to cook through a series of accidental events, and the fact that, you know, my mum would force me. No, she wouldn't force me. She would leave me at home on a Sunday morning when she went to church, and I'd have to watch food cook and stuff like that. I learned how to cook in this kind of accidental way in absorption. And this is a thing with emotions. I think we forget that a lot of men, actually, we are taught from a young age that feeling is weakness, feeling is bad, feeling and expressing how you feel will get you hurt in some way, whether that's physically or emotionally. And then when we become men and in adulthood, and we're told you should feel more, you should express more. And then the men look at you and they're like, what do you mean? I don't even understand what that means. And then we berate men for that, and we taught them, you know, all sorts of things, stupid, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, we never taught them Spanish, right? They never learned Spanish. So they don't have this language of emotions as well. And I really love what you said about, you know, feeling frustrated and misunderstood. And I think this is something I'm seeing a lot with not just men, but even the young boys I speak to sometimes, is that they feel like they're being viewed through this lens of not who they actually are, but through the lens of who people project them to be, which is often just a case of the lens that we see men in general. And, you know, we live in a day and age now, if we're really honest, the view of men is incredibly negative. You know, it's incredibly negative. You don't see a positive word about men written in the press, on social media. Like, if you celebrate men, you are likely to receive a backlash. And I've seen this occur on Instagram on numerous occasions. Women celebrate men like, these are these great men in my life. Like, I love men, they blah, 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 blah. And then the comments just fill up with, what about the rapists? What about the murderers? What about this? What about this? It's like, well, these two things can coexist. And I'm seeing that men are internalizing a lot of this feeling about what it means to be a man. And it's leaving them feeling frustrated, angry, or shameful, right? And I see that they deal with those things in slightly different ways. Like some men are shameful, they feel shame or they feel hurt. They cover that with anger, just like you talked about anger becoming the secondary emotion because it's more acceptable. But I also see a lot of men who are shameful, and that shame dominates them and just causes them to hide and try and disappear from the world and do their best to just be like what I call ghosts. Like, they have no impression on anybody. They're impossible to hurt anybody in any way. And they just fall into this kind of ultra nice guy category because they believe if they're just really nice to everybody and they're one of the good ones, and the world will reward them and everyone will pat them on the back. And those men also sometimes become angry because at some point they realize that actually that's not working, and they've been really nice and no one pays attention to them. They don't get any attention from women they want to date. They're not getting the jobs they want. They're not meeting the friends they want to. Their life isn't the way they want. And then they often then become angry too.
Yeah, and that is such a massive point, because, like I said, I'm a truth seeker, and we're always looking for what's true. And I don't always like what's true. But let's say I'm single. Don't know if my wife's about, better be careful. but let's say I'm single and I'm out there now, and there's this girl I really like, and I get an idea that if I behave in a certain way that she might like me back. So I start showing up with all these different behaviors and all these different traits that I know that she likes, and I'm selling her this version of myself that I think she'll buy. But that's not who I am. I'm a little bit like that. I can be like that, but I'm not like that all the time. But I'm telling her, I'm showing her that that's who I am all the time. Then a couple of weeks go down the line and the cracks start appearing. And all of a sudden, to her, I've changed. What's all this about? You're not the person I thought you was. You're always things, and then I'll have a response to that. She'll have a response to the way I behave, and before you know it, we're in this toxic relationship, and we're building our relationship on shame, blame, resentment, all of these different things. And the thing about blame is blame never really helps anybody. Why a lot of time when I'm talking to clients, they'll say to me that it's somebody else's fault and it's blame and it's all these different things. And I ask them like, where's that getting you? Where's it getting you, this blaming thing? Where's it actually I get why you're doing it. It's a very human thing to do. And you're probably right. It probably is their fault. But where's it getting you? Because what we're now doing is we're now moving away from the impact of the situation that's caused you all this distress. So now we're moving away from the impact of that. We're not even focusing on all the emotions and trying to acknowledge and accept things in any way. We're now just going, it's their fault. And we're having this expectation of them to do something or not. And that's where I have this thing called the 4 A's. And it's the filter that I don't necessarily tell the clients, but it's what I'm always trying to look things through. And I say to myself, okay, what do I need to be aware of here? That's the first A. Awareness. What is the real problem? So I listen and I pick up the emotions and the reactions and the responses, and I start to think about what possible triggers there could be there and emotions that they find hard to sit with and difficult to articulate. And I start to look at the things that they could have done, maybe they should have done that didn't, and all them different things. So I'm really trying to understand, let's become aware of what the real problem is here. And then the next one, really difficult one, accountability. I know that person should do that thing. You're absolutely right. They should do it. It's their responsibility. They should do it. It's the right thing to do. You're absolutely right. But they're not going to do it. And they're like, yeah, but they should. Yeah, I know. You said that. Yeah, they should do it. And you're right. I agree with you. Yeah, well, so then I'm just going to wait for them to do that. But while you wait, you're going to be in all of this discomfort, because I want you to take a look at them. They don't care. They're just getting on with their life. They're not thinking about you. They're moving forward. And now you're sat here with all this anger and this rage and this bitterness, and it's destroying you and consuming you, and you're obsessing over something that they should do. And again, you're right. They should do it, but they're not going to. So what I challenge you to do now is take accountability, is to step up and take back, not responsibility or blame, take ownership, empower yourself by taking control of the situation. And let that problem be their problem. Because right now, it's their problem, but you're having all the pain and the impact from it. And then after that is the third A, acceptance. There will be things in your life, but it doesn't matter how much you try to recreate it in your mind, you can't change it. And the only thing you can do, the only option when you've gone through everything, all of the emotions, all of the stories, all of the situations and experiences that you've had in this situation, it will come down to one thing. Do you accept it or not? Can you accept it or not? Will you accept it or not? Because people say to me, Johnny, I'm trying to accept it. I'm working on acceptance. I'm wrestling with acceptance. And I said, well, there's your problem. Because if you're doing all that, you're trying to change it so you can accept it. Accepting it means that you don't do any of that stuff. It is what it is, and you move forward. And I know you don't like it. And I know that it feels like you're forgiving somebody or letting someone get away with something. And I get all of that, I know. But it's destroying you. So how do you accept something? Well, you focus on what you can be accountable for. And you move forward. So you're aware, you're accountable for what's fair and what's reasonable and what you're capable of being accountable for. You accept what you can't. And then you move on to the last A, which is action. What can I do? What should I do in this situation? And we bear in mind that sometimes that action is to not take an action. As long as it's a choice and you're choosing it, not doing something is a good idea in some cases. You know, it's not always an action to take. So I think that answers some aspect of the question that you asked me about a day ago.
But it's powerful, that acceptance, isn't it? Because the accountability, that's the one I wanted to jump onto, because often we hold on to these feelings and emotions about something someone else has done. And, you know, I speak to a lot of people about this. They're like holding on to this grudge, this anger, this frustration that someone else shouldn't have done that. And that can be years, months, years, days, decades, right? And we hold on to it almost as if us holding on to that is going to do something to the other person. But as you said, they got no fucking idea. They don't know. They don't care. They've moved on with their life. And actually holding on to that anger, that frustration, that resentment, that eats away at us. That hurts us, you know, and even down to the medical level, right? They started to be able to link emotions that were repressed and unexpressed, right, over years and decades of people's lives to serious conditions, you know, cancer, heart disease, and so forth. So in fact, by holding on to these emotions, this anger, this frustration you hold towards other people, other groups of people, it's not that you're letting them win by accepting, right? Because I think that's something we often hear from people like, oh, but if I accept it, I'm letting them win, as if it's a competition. But actually, we're saving ourselves from literal like death and sickness and illness.
Yeah. And I think if I excel at anything in my life, it's understanding how to lead yourself, becoming someone who embodies self-leadership. Now, what does that mean? That means that my evidence is this. I grew up in poverty and violence, and I would have, understandably, every conceivable excuse to have been a real bad person and a real negative person and a really toxic and destructive person. But I'm not that person at all. As I said to you earlier, I live in a really beautiful part of the country, away from the cities, because that's how I realized I prefer to live. I've got a wonderful wife, 2 amazing sons, 2 smelly dogs, and a really nice big house, nice car, all of those different trappings and things like that. I live a really great life. So how the heck did I do that? How did I go from poverty, violence, and, well, part of it was facing that situation with my father. For a very long time, I allowed my father's version of the way life was to dictate my path forward. And there was something really freeing about looking, and also not being angry at him, not blaming him, I think real freedom when it comes to these situations is for it to not be about them at all anymore. That's real freedom. It's not going, oh, it's their fault, and yeah, they should do this and they should do that, but they probably won't, and getting all up in the anger of it. It's about just going, do you know what? I had this moment, right, where, and it was probably the most helpful thing that ever happened to me and I remember when my sons were really young, and my wife said to me, I want to have a conversation with you. And I was like, oh, this is going to be tricky. Whatever it is, it's going to be tricky. And she says, I know that this is going to be difficult, but I think it might be a good idea to have a photograph with your father and our boys. And she goes, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I'm just going to leave the idea with you, which just speaks to how lovely she is, right? Mm-hmm. So I sit with this idea. And at first I'm like, what? Is she crazy? Rare, all of these different things. And then after a little while, the emotions dropped away, and I was like, maybe. And then I started thinking, well, actually, this could be an opportunity to talk to him. I'm an adult now. I don't need to be scared anymore. Maybe I can have a conversation with him. Maybe we can build a relationship. Maybe he'll just tell me that he's sorry and that everything, he was going through a hard time. And he'll say something that's going to make me, because I want to forgive him. I want him to be in my life. I want that badly. So he was already winning. Anything he said, I'd have bought it left, right, and center. But we get there, we go in there. It's all a little bit awkward. I haven't seen him in a really long time. And we get the photograph with the kids. And I looked at my wife. He's like, this is a terrible plan, Johnny. And I'm like, it's all good, man. I got it. And she's like, So she goes and gets in the car with the kids. And all of a sudden, I turn into the little kid I was again, and I start stuttering, and I'm sweating, and I feel uncomfortable, and I can't get my words out, and everything's really difficult. And I kind of tell him the impact of what he has done, and I stand there, and it goes on for I don't know how long, and he just looks at me, and he says, "You sound like your mum. You're always causing trouble." And then he just goes on about something else. And in that moment, something happened. All of a sudden, everything just fell away. And I looked at him for what he really was. And I just thought, you're a joke, man. Why am I doing all this for what? Why? What? And I just realized, and all of a sudden I had this pity for him, this sympathy, this empathy, this almost compassion of like, man, you look at your life, look at you, you're on your own. You're like, wow. And it hit me like really, really, really hard. And I just thought, okay. And then this was the gift it gave me. I realized that there was a problem between my dad and I, but it wasn't my problem. It was his. And I kind of just gave it back to him and sort of thought, good luck with that. And I said to him, the last thing I think I ever said to him was, if you ever want to have a conversation with me about any of the things I've mentioned, you know where I am. I haven't heard from him. So there will come a time when he passes away, and I will be able to, because a lot of grief is about regret, and I will be able to look back and say to myself in that very difficult moment, Johnny, you did everything you could have done. You knew what the problem was. You were aware of the problem. You took accountability for the hard stuff that you needed to take accountability for. You accepted what you couldn't influence anymore, which was him. And the action was to walk away and protect yourself from this toxic human. And that's what I did, you know? So it is complicated, understanding that other people influence you. But here's the hard bit. And I want people to know that hear this, that I do understand how this hits. But at some point, I hope for you that you will hear this in a way in which it's intended. People will do horrible things to you, say horrible things to you. And in many cases, you let them. And that's what's difficult. And I'm not talking about like serious assaults or anything like that. I understand the difference between that. But what I'm saying is these people that keep showing up in your life, regardless of their role in your life, you're letting them. You're taking ownership of that situation. You get these dudes, right? These people in life, and they walk around with these emotional bags. And if you stop for long enough, they'll tell you all their problems, right?
Yep.
And
Amen.
what they do is they got these emotional bags and they put them down and they look at you awkwardly until you go, oh, guess I'll just pick these bags up then and wander off with them. And then about 2 hours later, you're wondering why you feel so stressed. And it's because someone's just dumped all their problems on you and walked away. And you picked up the bags and you skipped off like, hey, I've just helped somebody, people pleasing, yay. And it's like, nope, you've just stitched yourself up for the day or whatever. So I say all this and I make humor out of it a little bit. I don't mean that in a disrespectful tone. I'm just saying that that's life, right? Life is crazy, man. It's a wild experience. But when we navigate things, we got to understand the difference between our emotions and somebody else's.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful story there, really powerful in so many ways. And it's like often in that moment with your father, what I'm really hearing is you were almost calling him forward into a version of the man that you needed him to be for the two of you to have a relationship. And in that moment, in his response, he's still stuck as the man he has always been, right? And he was taught to be, you know, it would have been in his upbringing to how he should be as a man. And he's so stuck in that. He doesn't see any accountability for himself, because also taking accountability, I imagine, would be incredibly painful for him to take on, because he'd have to see the things and feel the things he's done to other people in his life. And he doesn't really have the capacity, whether that's mentally or emotionally, to have that level of kind of empathy and accountability and see himself, because it would be incredibly painful for him to hold that. And it's so true of so many people that we meet in life, whether that's romantic relationships or family, is we want them to be someone almost beyond the level of their programming, right? I speak from personal experience in my own father, wanting a dad who really shows up and is really curious and interested in me and all these sorts of things. And he just doesn't have the capacity to be that human being, because I really have an understanding of his upbringing, and I'd be like, oh man. And in those moments when you are with someone like that, I think sometimes we can kind of go one of a few ways, but anger is one of the ones that can come up. Like, what is wrong with you? Why can't you do this? Why won't you take accountability? Which I think a lot of people do. But also the direction that you went is that kind of almost feeling sorry for them, because you're like, oh, wow, this is who you are. And I feel incredibly sad for you, because this is actually who you are. And you can't be anybody else right now in this moment, or maybe ever, because you just don't have the tools, or you haven't taken on the tools to be like a more expanded human being who can take accountability and have the emotional range to feel the impact of your actions. And I say why that's really important, because you being angry at him about that moment and beyond there doesn't impact him at all, as we've talked about. But it would sit on you and fester in you, and you would be seething at time to time. But in like having empathy, you kind of release yourself from it. The hook is like, actually, I see. There's nothing here for me, as you've said. This is about your capacity and who you are, and I'll be here when you want to have a conversation about these things. And you just never know if or when that will be.
And I hope for him that he makes a different decision one day, but I think it's unlikely, because that anger I held as a teenager in my early 20s, that was the emotional punishment that I gave myself for somebody else's actions. I walked around in rage all of the time, and that's a distinction that I make. Like anger is a healthy emotion. It's there to let you know that a boundary's been crossed, and it gives you that energy and that clarity to put it back in place again. But when anger becomes suppressed, it can go one of two directions. It can go outwards and it can become rage, which is anger that's out of control, usually ends in violence. Or it can go inward. And I think that's a strong component of depression, because it's that rage, that uncontrollable anger that you cannot or will not or don't know how to outwardly manage. So it just goes in on yourself, and you start to destruct, like with alcohol or having an affair or just doing something to try and control this monster that's inside you. That's this anger, this rage that you feel like only somebody else can really give you the answers to, but they can't. Because what I was doing with my father was as an egocentric child, I was making their behavior about who I was. So when he rejected me, when he, in every conceivable way, when he was violent towards me, when he tortured me and my family, I thought that must have meant that, obviously, from a logical kid, I'm like, that must have meant I did something wrong. And it created this hypervigilance in me where I was running about the house, and I have such empathy for that child that was running around the house, making sure that no one had blocked the toilet, that making sure that the windows weren't left open, making sure that the heating wasn't on, making sure that there wasn't something really in the house that he could kick off about. And I felt like that was my role, and that I was taking that on, and all of those different things. But really what it comes down to is realizing that in that moment that I gave that problem back to him. And that's what was freeing for me. That was what really helped me move forward. And it helped me realize that I'm not that guy. I'm not him. I'm not my father. I'm not my father's son. I'm my own person, and I get to decide who I am. And it's like, you said something there that made me think of an analogy about going back to a dry well. And that's what I mean when I say you let them. I kept for my whole life trying to show up the way my dad was. My dad would say something like, why don't you go to college? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? So I'd go and do all those things. And when I did them, they weren't good enough. There was another thing I should have done, or something else I didn't do, or something. And it was like a game I could never win. But yet I kept playing. I just kept playing all of the time and expecting a different result. And as you rightly say, and as I've sort of suggested as well, he's not capable of it. I'm asking him to speak Spanish, and he can't speak Spanish. And it doesn't matter how much I want him to, he can't. He cannot do it. And he's not willing to learn. He's not willing to change. He doesn't see the problem. I can't work with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take accountability for what I'm responsible for, my two sons. And I'm going to teach them to be emotionally intelligent. I'm going to teach them to be tough, strong. There's this not very popular definition of what strength is in a man. And for me, and it won't be popular, I know it won't, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is, I want to know that no matter what happens in this life, I have the capability to be violent if I want to, if I need to. But I won't. I have it under control. I have it under control. I get up in the morning and I do Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not saying that I'm good at it, but I'm saying that it helps me feel like I'm capable of looking after my kids, my son, if anything was to happen. So for me, that strength there is I can be just as violent as my father. Absolutely. I can't do the horrible things he did, but I can be just as violent as him. But I'm not going to. I'm going to keep that under control. you know, because that's what a real man does. You know, he respects people and he leads with respect. He leads with curiosity. He doesn't tell you what's best for you. Like as coaches, we don't tell people what's best for them, do we? Like who are we to tell people that we know what's best for them? No, what we do is we sit and we listen. And I can't tell you how many times, man, that I've sat there so I do 90-minute sessions and I've sat there for 60 minutes. And then at the end, I'll summarize what I think I've understood. And I'll say, listen, if anything doesn't sound like, if you don't agree, just let me know. And then they'll go, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. How did you know that? And I think, you just told me. I just sat here and listened for 60 minutes. You just told me, you know? So it's a powerful tool. Anyway, sorry, I've digressed again.
No, it's fine. And it's interesting you use a point around having the capacity for violence, right? Because I know I had Trevor Bowen on the podcast a couple of years ago from Uncivilized Man, and he has this idea of a man should cultivate the ability to be dangerous but never be a danger, right? And it sounds exactly what you're saying, is I have the capacity for violence, I have the capacity to look after yourself or protect yourself in a way that you need to, right? In this world that can be a bit crazy, but also to have the emotional intelligence and the communication skills that you never have to actually use it. And I see this in a really interesting way. Like I've got a little son and he's only, 15 months, and me and my partner talk about this. And I'm like, I want him to be able to do some sort of martial art type thing. So he learns how to feel confidence in his body, confidence into how to use his body, not necessarily just to protect himself, but actually to like the confidence in his body to kind of like move it, to feel like I can do things with this body. This body is useful to me. I don't need to be afraid of being in my body. Because I think this is one of the ways in which so many people, and I would say men, they lack the kind of confidence in themselves because they never really learnt the confidence of the body. You know, I did a lot of sport when I was a kid, and it meant that like I knew how fast I could run. I knew how much I could pick up. I knew, what sort of sports I could engage myself. And it gave me a huge amount of confidence in myself that I lacked in getting from the men in my life in the way that a man or father can really bless a son in giving direction and confidence in who he is. And I got a lot of my confidence through there. So it's just, I see it as an important thing. And like you said, it's an unpopular idea because we want men, because of the fear we have around men, we have so much fear that if a man does have the capacity of violence, that he's almost guaranteed he's going to use it, right? We don't believe that men can have the capacity to be in control. And obviously no one's going to be in control all of the time. But even if I do get violent, and I say this very honestly, like when sometimes I have various practices around anger that if I get really angry, I might close this door, I've got a bunch of pillows, I put a bit of music on, and I will smash the shit out of those pillows. And for many years, I would have never done that because like some of your story, I have a very negative idea of violence and I didn't ever want to be violent. But what it meant was that a lot of my anger never got expressed because I didn't feel that it was okay to be angry. And it unlocked so much for me when I did some kind of men's work programs and even the programs I run now is like, well, you bring in this healthy expression of anger so that we feel that we can move that anger instead of just holding on to it all the time and just using practice like that. I might look to someone, if they were a fly on the wall, they'd be like, my God, David is completely out of control and violent, right? Yeah. But I've created a container, this room and the space to allow myself to be out of control in a controlled environment. I think this is an incredibly healthy thing that a lot of us humans, not just men, have lost, and then our anger just seeps out in the world constantly. Passive aggressiveness, disgusting comments on Instagram, saying horrible things in comment sections in places. It's just like this anger that we're sitting on. We don't have any healthy outlets for it. And I think that physical acts of violence that could be against a pillow or a mattress, is actually a really healthy way to move this through our system. In ways that we might have done in times of battle and combat or ritual combat, for example.
Yeah. I mean, what you've just said is I've seen endless amounts of times, like if you're angry, guess what isn't helpful? Telling yourself you're not angry or that you shouldn't be angry because you are angry. That's the truth about the situation. And as you say, you pull into the supermarket, somebody nicks your space and you're ready to kill them. it's not about the space, man. It's about all the pent up anger. You know, that's not a rational response to someone nicking your space, you know? So you go in and having that anger and experiencing it, and as you rightly say, there's a physical component to anger. It's an energy. It is an energy, and it's in you. Just like fear is an energy. Fear is exactly what you need in many times to gain clarity, to gain absolute clarity, to be sure, to sharpen you up, you know, and to make sure that you make the right decisions and you pay attention and you focus. And anger's the same, you know, and it's like there's an anger in you, and yeah, there's a boundary that might need to be put in place, and there needs to be a difficult conversation. You probably shouldn't have that conversation while you're angry, because then it will become rage, probably, because that person's probably going to antagonize you or not give you the response you're looking for. Or even if they do give you the response you're looking for, you're not going to be satisfied because you're angry, you know. So having that anger in a physical way, in a safe way, creating a space, exactly as you've just said, to punch a pillow. Me and my son, we've got a boxing bag in the gym, and when he's angry, I leave him to it. And when he's angry and he's tired and it's all come out, and I say to him, "Are you okay?" He won't like this, but that's when the tears come out.
Yes,
that's when the tears come out, and that's when they start. That, you know, they haven't got the energy anymore to defend that, to put up that front. And that's when the tears come out. That's when the truth comes out. That's when you find out that they were hurt by something that happened at school today, or they felt scared, or they don't understand why somebody did what they did and they betrayed them. All of these things come out, and it's messy, and it doesn't sound like, say, you and I talking, but I've got the capacity to sit with him and listen, and also not tell him that it's going to be all right, not tell him that he doesn't need to worry or anything like that. Just let him have his emotions. And what really surprises me when I do that is then not long afterwards, he's cool. I'm going to go and see my friend Jack now. Oh, okay, we're over it now, we? Yeah, cool. Oh, okay, good. And it just needed to clear it. It just needed to clear it and get it out there. And it's something that I found so fascinating. Like I talked about Jiu-Jitsu earlier, and that's a recent thing that I've done. And I've wanted to do it for a long time. And the truth of it is I was scared of it. I was scared because I knew I wouldn't be the toughest guy in the room. I knew that I'd probably get tapped loads and I'd get hurt, and that it would challenge me in ways in which I would feel weak. And I didn't want to have any part of that. So I avoided it for a really long time. But what I find super interesting about jiu-jitsu is there's this idea in the world that we need to feminize men in some way. They're not my words. I can't remember whose words they are, but we feminize men and we get them to talk much the way that you would see women talk. You know, they sit around in cafes or whatever, or they meet up and they find it a little bit easier in general to have conversations about how they feel. Men don't do that very often. But yet when I go into jiu-jitsu and I'm rolling around and I get tapped or I tap somebody, after that, the guy I just rolled around with, him and I will sit on the side and he'll start talking to me. And he'll start telling me that he's having a hard time with this, that his partner's not well, or his mum's passing away, or he might lose his job, or something that's going on. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder why he feels like he can have that conversation with me. And I think it helps that he just tapped me out. He doesn't need to feel weak anymore or vulnerable in front of me because he just tapped me out, you know. But there's something in that, like you say, that energy, that movement, that physicality. And again, jiu-jitsu is safe. Like, we're in there, we've all agreed to what we're doing. There are rules. It's not about aggression and violence. It's about jiu-jitsu. It's a sport, much like it would be rugby or anything like that. And there's something about that, because I think that sometimes for some men, sitting in a circle and waiting for your moment to then say the things that you don't want anyone in that room to know, that you feel are really deeply ashamed of, that you don't fully understand or understand how to communicate to the room, the pressure of that, they're not going to do it. Some people cannot do it, will not do it, which means that they will never get the opportunity to speak their mind, because what we know is that human beings organize their mind through conversation. So if we don't get to have conversation and hear how we feel, and to let the brakes off and just let those words come out messy and however they come out, then we don't often recognize how we feel, which means we're never going to be able to find solutions. It's one of the things that worries me the most about the world, because if conversation is how we organize our mind, then if we can't have debates, then what's going to happen? because debate is a really useful tool. Debate allows us to either learn to defend our feelings and our thoughts and our beliefs and our opinions, or abandon them. Because when someone says, tell me why you feel that way, and you start talking and you go, yeah, I actually don't know why I feel that way. That's when you got to say to yourself, well, if I don't know why I feel that way, how true is that? And then you start to be curious about what the other person's saying, and you learn, you know? That's why I try to lead with curiosity. I want to ask questions. When somebody is annoyed at a situation or someone's upset, I want to understand what's going on there. And that's what I did with my father. You know, I found out that when he was a child, he was publicly flogged often in his village. And I tried to, and although it doesn't justify anything or make it okay, when I stop and I think about what that must have been like, it begins to give me an understanding of the person he is. And what that then allows me to do is realize that, oh, okay, his behavior had nothing to do with me. It wasn't about me not being good enough or me anything. This is just who he was. This is who he was forged into being. And until he chooses to forge a different path and to forge a different man, nothing's going to change. And he's a dangerous person to be around. Therefore, I choose not to be, you know? Anyway, sorry, I move in all sorts of directions with it.
No. And I love what you said there about the physical. I don't think you said exactly how I kind of took it down. It's like the physicality of something like jiu-jitsu, right? There's a physicality in a bond that men love the physicality of things, you know, like sport, football. I played football for a lot of years. I played cricket for a lot of years. And it's not just as a physical necessarily coming together, but there's a physicality that creates a bond between us. But there's also something else you kind of described as well, what I kind of see, and I see this in kind of the group programs I run, which is when men struggle together, right? When we are in a struggle together, we bond together through that struggle. And I think all humans, to be honest, not just men, I see women exactly the same. Because through the struggle, there's a vulnerability that has to be recognized. You know, it might be spoken or it might just be seen. It might be communicated in some way. But through that shared struggle together, we come together and something's hard. Someone fails, someone succeeds, or someone wins and someone loses. You know, there's a level almost of like trust that gets built. Like, I know you in some capacity. Yes. And that allows for the opening up and the vulnerability for another man to speak to another man about what's going on in his life. And I say that the one thing I think is really important, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. You kind of touched on it when you talk about debating, is that we live in this world now so often where everyone is speaking to respond. You know, as podcasters, we are incredibly guilty of that. But the thing that we don't learn, which I think causes the most amount of issues when it comes to communication, is our capacity to listen, our capacity to actually listen. You know, and as coaches, and I never really knew this until I studied my coaching, how horrendous most people are at listening. How most people are not actually listening to anybody. They're like filtering through what they said and just going, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about my thoughts? What does this mean about my life? Constantly, instead of listening to understand each other. And, you know, in that moment when, you know, that man comes to you and he tells you what's going on in his life, you know, he struck gold, right? Because he's sitting next to a man who is absolutely trained in listening. So you can actually really be like, oh man, that must be really tough. What's going on with your wife, your children, your partner? Like, what do you think's contributing to that? Or some other question that allows him to go deeper into his experience. But what I think so many of us lack, or we've lacked the modeling of, is like actual listening to understand us, or listening to go deeper into our experience. Because there's so many men I speak to come to me for coaching where they struggle with listening, they struggle with communicating. And then when we talk about their fathers, they give me examples of when they've gone to their dad with a struggle, and their dad has just given them some sort of almost cookie cutter, like one-liner, like, go sort that shit out. You've got this. And it's like, well, that's really nice of you. But this boy came to you, opened up his heart, and he was looking for some wisdom. He was looking for some guidance. He was looking for some connection. But because they don't know how to communicate, they don't really know how to listen, they don't really know how to ask good questions, the moment completely passes and someone is left feeling really unmet in their need.
Yeah, I mean, one of the fundamental, if someone was to say to me, what's the greatest piece of advice I could give anybody about relationships? It's this, is that when your partner is telling you something, really try with every part of your soul to understand how it must feel to be them in that situation. Like, really try. Like, I mean, like, this is, you're not just trying to understand so you can say the right thing or you can move through the situation or find a solution or anything like that. Your job in that moment is just to sit there and listen and try to connect with what they're saying, maybe through your own experiences, maybe through really thinking, yeah, man, what would I have done in that situation? I can't believe, like, wow, I love you and you felt like that and you were on your own. And it's like, oh, everything changes. Because I think sometimes in relationships, people forget they love each other. They forget that they love each other, and that when you look over at the other person and that person that you love is sad, unhappy, scared, whatever it is that's going on, then you doing something for them or you conceding on something that you feel passionate about or whatever it is that's going on, if you have any ability at all to help with their situation, why on earth wouldn't you do it? Because you love them, right? And I get that it's complicated. I get that. It's like I very often have clients to me going, yeah, me and my partner, we negotiated and it's 50-50. And I say, oh, great. So you're both miserable. Because that's what you've just achieved. You know, both of you resent each other now because neither of you got what you wanted. Because in my relationship, what I try to do, and again, I'm not perfect. I'm flawed. It doesn't always go according to plan. But is if we can achieve 70-30, and let's say my wife gets the 70 and I get the 30, what that is the gift of love. That's me saying, do you know what? I really don't want to go to that function with you because I don't really like the people there. They make me feel uncomfortable. They're always talking about money or whatever. But because it's important to you, I'm going to go. And I'm not going to go begrudgingly and stand in the corner and look like I don't want to be there. I'm going to give it effort. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to socialize. And I'm going to do it because I love you. I'm doing it for you, you know? And then guess what? Next time when I need something, not that I'm doing it for this reason, that sticks to them and they go, do you know what? That time that you did that thing for me, I really appreciate it. So I'm happy to return the favor. I want to see you happy like you saw me happy. And this is the bit that's missing, is that we get into this, like, the one thing that will kill a relationship dead is resentment. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Quite often it's the little tiny resentments. They're always having to empty the dishwasher. They're always having to do the school run. They're always having to take the bin out. They're always having to do whatever all of the time, endlessly, while the other person doesn't do anything. That's going to build up. And they will learn to hate you over time. and they will practice that stuff in the quiet halls of some cafe somewhere with their friend who's probably got the same thing going on, you know? So, yeah. And again, I suppose that speaks a little bit to what you were talking about the negativity of men, because what we know is that when we ask someone to change the behavior, two things need to be in place. The person who's got to change their behavior needs to be willing to do that and willing to put the effort in and work on it. But then the people around them need to be patient and willing to let that change happen over time. And I think that there's a lot of guys in the world that there are elements of blame. They do need to step up at times. They do need to do these difficult things that you and I have done. And that's not to say that we're perfect or anything like that. But we've gone out there and we've had these hard conversations and we faced some of these demons in our past. And it's allowed us to be better than what we were. And we keep trying, right? And I understand why it's difficult, but it is necessary. And you can do it. And I don't care how old you are. You can change and you can be better and you can learn to understand. And it starts with trying to understand that person in front of you that you care about, your son. You know, if you've let your son down, then sit there and think about what that must have been like for them. Just like I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about what it must have been like to be my father, being flogged in Africa. That must have been horrible. Now, I'm not talking about it justifying what he did. I'm just, all of a sudden, like you said, I understand now. I understand. And that's the difference, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that about the understanding, because I almost have this little devil's advocate in my brain. Is like, you know, the understanding is really powerful. And a lot of people go, oh, but when I do that with my partner, for example, or even a parent, I become understanding and then I'm compassionate. And then I go, oh, it's okay. you had a hard life and like, you don't know any better. And then they kind of, they hold no boundary is what I see a lot inside of relationships, whether those are family relationships or even romantic relationships. And because, we feel that compassion, we're like, oh God, it makes sense. Like you had this happen to you. And I guess I'm saying this for the listeners, less for yourself, is like, but the other thing to really add in there is you can still hold boundaries with people, even though you have a deep understanding of their pain and trauma and why it's formed. But that boundary is your responsibility, not theirs. And people find this very difficult because like if you have a partner who doesn't listen to you or you allow them to treat you badly, because I also believe that as well. You said that earlier. I believe we teach people how to treat us. We teach them how to treat us through how we respond to them, what we say yes and no to, and what we allow. We teach them. And again, the caveat is, horrific individual incidents and so forth can come out of nowhere. But inside of relationships, if we allow someone to verbally abuse us and we stay, right, and we don't like give a boundary and follow through with our consequences, we are teaching them that our boundaries are meaningless and that we are okay with the way they're treating us. And obviously they shouldn't do that, but it's our responsibility to hold our boundaries and to protect ourselves. But the key people here is to have boundaries, to say like, I understand that you have been through terrible, difficult times and your life was really difficult as a young person, but now you see the impact of your action. This is the boundary I have and the consequences are X, Y, and Z. If you cross this, again, this is what I'm going to do. Those boundaries, people, those are your responsibility because it's for your peace. It's not for them. It's for you. This is for you, but it also protects and creates the relationship between this other person in the way that you want it to be. And even to some degree, how they want it to be as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think just because you can take away someone's pain, it doesn't mean you're responsible for doing so, and I think quite a lot of the time there are moments in our coaching, I'm sure, where we know that there's a piece of advice we could give or there's something we could say that would make them feel better, but then would they learn what they need to learn? Would they go through that difficult situation and navigate it and figure it out for themselves? Because all I teach that person in that moment is that when you have a problem, come and speak to Johnny, I'll give you the answer. And I can't be true. That just can't be. I can't be that wise. It's not true. I refuse to believe that. That can't be true. And it'd be a hell of a responsibility as well. So absolutely, I totally agree. That boundary thing is so important in relationships. And I think the bit that's missing there from what I said earlier is that both of you need to do that. It's not just me trying to understand my wife. It's my wife trying to understand me too, trying to listen. And we're trying to understand each other, and we're trying to, it's not me against her, it's us against the problem. We're navigating the problem together. We're trying to find a solution that works, that's true, that's authentic, that, it might not be great for you on this occasion, or it might not be great for me on this occasion, but it's okay, we love each other, we're a team, and this is how we roll. And this is what we're constantly trying to work on all the time. My wife is perimenopausal, and a lot of life for her is really difficult now. And if you want to apply logic to the situation, it's not going to work because a lot of it is irrational and emotional and all of those things. And I'm not saying she's irrational. I'm saying the situations and the way she feels are not within her control. So for me, it's about trying to create safety for her all the time. I've learned so much about menopause because I want to understand. I want to know as best as I can as a man who's never going to have to go through this, what it feels like to be her, so that I can do what I can, which sometimes is just go away. and that's cool too,
Yeah. And that's, it kind of speaks to something you were saying before when you were talking about the kind of 70-30, that's what I see is devotion. As you talk about there, devotion to your partner is being like, I'm going to go to this function that I don't want to go to, right? I'm not interested in this thing, but I'm going to go because it means a lot to you. And I'm going to go and I'm going to be happy. And I'm going to do my best to enjoy it and make sure you enjoy it and so forth. And devotion is also, like you said, the bi-directional of the 70-30, but devotion is also learning about what they're going through just so you can support them in the best way that you can. And I guess why am I pointing to this? Because I had an experience of this last year when my partner got pregnant. My partner also got pregnant. I picked up books and I learned about pregnancy. Like I read 2 books about pregnancy. I was telling her what symptoms and things she was experiencing before they actually started happening to her, or when they happened. I was like, oh, this is so-and-so. And she was like, wow. And why did I do that? Partly because I wanted to be involved, but partly because how can I support this woman best in what she's going through? And I feel like sometimes, I kind of wrote it here, it's like devotion versus selfishness. The selfishness is like me, I want this. I think David Date would call it stage one, where we just think about our own needs and what we want, or, we're just kind of selfish, and to some degree we're childish. We're just like, it's all about me and my needs, and fuck them, I want what I want. And moving through those levels of kind of consciousness of doing relationship is like moving into, healthy relating, but also devotion, like giving to the other person lovingly, because you love them and because it's great for you in the relationship. And, I'm speaking to the kind of men here and women listening, because I think it's important for us both, is like, keeping score in this way, keeping score of the devotion, of the give and take, is incredibly damaging to a relationship, because we're bad scorekeepers. We remember everything we do. We always remember everything we do, right? And we add a couple of points to that score too. But the things our partner does silently in the background for us, the washing they do for us, the cleaning they do for us, the school pickups and stuff, we forget those things. And we always feel like our score, we've done more. Because once you start scorekeeping, you get into really toxic dynamic. And I've seen it many times with people I've coached, and you're just like, you have to drop the score, and you both have to move into devotion, and the score will take care of itself. Like, we have to, and stepping into that love and devotion of our partners.
Yeah, sometimes there can be long periods of time when it's about the other person. Because they're doing something difficult, and that's okay, because you love them. And that's the bit I keep coming back to. Remember, you love them. You know what this game's like, right? The podcast game and the social media game and all of these different things. I don't know if it's true for you. I'd imagine it is, because you've been through it. But there are so many times you want to quit, right?
Oh,
so many times that you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? What's the point? And I've had those moments where I've really, I mean, genuinely and honestly, not to create drama or to get attention. I mean, I really want to quit. It's just too hard. And my wife will sit down with me calmly, and she says, Johnny, and she reminds me of all of the people that I've helped, all of the things that I've said that have helped people, all of the things I've put out there, like the documentary and the podcast, all of this effort I've put in. And there's this incredible meme or image I saw once, and it's two people tunneling, and one person just decides to give up, and the other person carries on. But what they didn't realize is they were that close to getting to the diamond that they were looking for. And it's like the story I tell in the slavery of addiction. Like, that there was a moment when I moved out, when I can't tell you, I was 16, 17 years old, and I had a whole bunch of jobs, and I didn't have any money at all. I didn't have any money for gas or anything like that. And I was struggling, and I was walking back, and I was so young. I think about that kid now, and I think, wow, I can't believe I was so young and I had that much problems. And I remember thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I really wanted to quit. I don't know what that means. I can't say I was suicidal, but I just wanted to tap out. I couldn't do it anymore. I just wanted it to end. And then I got to the end of this alley, and I was walking back from work, and there was £20 on the floor. And I thought, how, man? How has this happened? You know what I mean? It's like, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that happened. And the point of that whole story, the reason I tell you that is because don't quit, don't give up. And when I say that, I don't mean don't give up on certain things. There are sometimes you got to know when to quit. What I'm saying is don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on yourself, because you never know, that moment that you're about to quit could be the moment just before you find your version of that £20. And that's what I try to help people with is we're all navigating life in this unbeautiful, unpretty, it's so rugged and raw. We're navigating it in the best way that we can. And inevitably we're going to make mistakes. And who you share your life with is really important. And I'm really lucky, because I have and it sounds like you are too. We have these really great partners that show up for us. And it's a privilege, absolute privilege for us to show up for them too, when we can. You should want to. You should be waiting in the wings thinking, yeah, this is my time to show up and be that guy and to be solid. My wife said something to me the other day. She was having a really hard time and she just said, I just don't want to be away from you. I just want to get in your pocket. And I thought to myself, wow. Like, that makes you feel important, man. I love it. It's like, what a privilege that is to be able to make somebody feel that safe. It's amazing, and that's what it's all about for me. It's about realizing that life is a scary place to do on your own. So if we're lucky enough to find the right person, look after them, treat them right, and they'll treat you right, and life won't stop throwing the punches at you. It's going to keep doing that. But at least you're doing it together, right?
Yeah. And my only thing I want to add to that is for the listeners is because I wasn't always this man. I wasn't always this man that could be devotional. I was selfish. I was I and me for a very long time. Like, it was all about what I wanted. Like, I was a terrible partner in so many ways. And, this stuff's changed in the last kind of 8 years to shift the mentality. And I guess what I'm kind of, to finish up here is like the things we've spoken about here, the emotional aspects, doing this sort of work to understand our past and how it's affecting us and building that compassion and empathy for people and, even the gratitude for ourselves and who we've become enables us to be these men, these partners that show up because, as I just speak for myself before, I was deeply uncompassionate and uncaring and selfish as a person and as a partner. And I was not devotional. I was not a good partner. Like, I didn't show up in the ways that I do now. And it took effort and time and energy, but it has been the best time and effort that I potentially have ever spent in my life. Hands down, it's been, the best endeavor. And it doesn't stop. I'm not perfect. As we keep saying, we're not perfect. The work never ends for me, in my opinion. I have to still be aware of those patterns that just creep in and make me selfish. But it's so worth it. It's so worth it for what it gives you in life and also what it gives you, when you start to have children, because, if I hadn't done the work I've done now, I would have probably just become the men in my life that I didn't want to be.
Yeah. I mean, being a parent is another thing again. It's so hard, right? It's so hard and you never know if you're getting it right. And my friend tells me you never know if you're getting it right until you're paying for their therapy. Like, man, that's a low bar to set, bro. But we, what I have to practice, and I say practice because it removes the pressure of perfection. What I have to practice is showing up for my kid in the way in which I needed someone to be there for me, which wasn't necessarily to have the answers. It was just to give me that space that felt safe enough to explore my own mind so that I could find answers for myself. I could try things, I could make mistakes, because failure is a great teacher. And these days, and again, another lesson I learned from Jiu-Jitsu, the only way to get better is to keep failing and learning why you failed. And I love that lesson. I love it. And that's what I never realized. I kept thinking I had to go in that room as like, I don't know, UFC champion, perhaps. I don't know. but I walked in there and I haven't, it was only the other day that I got my first tap. I've been doing it for months, and it's just like, okay. And every part of me wanted to celebrate, but I was like, be humble, be humble, be humble. Be humble. Just I was like, thank you, bro. It was like, inside, I was like, yes. But it's what it is, isn't it? And it's like being a partner, being a parent, they're both privileges. And it's recognizing that, like, we're lucky. We're so lucky. And so many people can have it. It's not an unattainable goal. We can all have it. We just got to treat it with respect. We got to nurture it like a house plant. You got to make sure it's watered and it's in the right light, in the right conditions. Otherwise, if it isn't, it wilts and eventually it dies. And we have to look after it. It's our responsibility. Anyway, I know we've overrun and so I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, we've run over the time. And it's just been such a fantastic conversation. One of the conversations that just weaves and dances through the different topics that are just, meaningful and important to both of us and our lives. And I'm sure the listeners are wondering where they can hear more from you, Johnny, where they can find out about your podcast, where they can find out about how to work with you.
Yeah, I'm on all social media platforms as a self-development coach. I have a podcast called the Johnny Lawrence Podcast, which is quite creative, but I had nothing else. I have a course as well. I have a course, the self-made course. Again, it uses the M.A.D.E. model to help people move forward. it's not something that promises answers, but what it does is it helps you discover who you are so that you can find them for yourself. And then it's a tool that you can use forever. I'm really proud of it. It's something that I feel like it was a privilege to be able to create it. So, give it a chance, go over and check it out and see what's there for you. But outside of that, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk to you. As you say, it's been a great opportunity, a great conversation. And I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you.